There are moments when silence speaks louder than words, when the absence of someone we once held close cuts deeper than any argument, any goodbye. She ghosted you. No explanation, no closure, just an empty void where connection once thrived. And in that emptiness, questions arise. What did I do wrong? Was it something I said? Did she ever truly care? These thoughts spiral, feeding on our insecurities, leaving us stranded in a sea of uncertainty. But what if this pain is not merely rejection, but a mirror reflecting something far greater within ourselves? The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus understood this all too well. He taught that we do not suffer from the things that happen to us, but from our judgments about them. In his view, external events, whether a lost love, a sudden betrayal, or a silent departure, are indifferent. What matters is how we choose to respond. If we allow ourselves to be consumed by anguish, we become prisoners of our own perception. But if we step back and examine the nature of loss with clarity, we may find that the true source of suffering lies not in her absence, but in our attachment to control, expectation, and the illusion of permanence. So why did she ghost you? Perhaps she was afraid. Perhaps she was unready. Or perhaps she simply moved on, as people often do. But beyond the surface of this heartache lies a deeper truth, one that has echoed through the halls of time, whispered by sages and seekers alike. This is not just about one person's disappearance. It is about the impermanence of all things, the fragile nature of human connection, and the illusions we cling to in order to feel secure. And in understanding this, we begin to see that the pain we feel is not a flaw, but an invitation to look inward, to question our attachments, and to discover a strength that does not rely on another's presence. In the bustling streets of ancient Rome, amidst the grandeur of marble temples and the ceaseless murmur of merchants haggling over their wares, lived a man who would shape the course of philosophical thought for centuries to come. Epictetus, once a slave and later a revered teacher, did not write his teachings down himself. They were preserved by his devoted student Arrian in the Discourses and the Enchiridion. His words, though spoken 2 millennia ago, resonate with startling clarity in our modern world. A world where the ache of abandonment, the sting of rejection, and the weight of expectations still press upon the human soul. Epictetus did not promise an easy life free of hardship. Instead, he offered a way to navigate suffering with grace and wisdom. At the core of his philosophy was a simple yet radical idea. We do not suffer because of external events, but because of our judgments about those events. The pain we feel when someone leaves us without explanation, when a relationship dissolves into silence, is not caused by their absence itself, but by our attachment to the outcome we desired. We tell ourselves stories. She should have told me. I deserved better. I must have done something wrong. And these narratives chain us to despair. To break free from this cycle, Epictetus urged his students to distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. The actions of others, the shifting tides of affection, the unpredictable nature of fate, all lie beyond our dominion. What remains within our grasp is our own response. To suffer is natural, but to let suffering define us is a choice. By accepting that we cannot dictate the behavior of others, we liberate ourselves from the torment of helplessness. When someone ghosts us, we can either dwell in the prison of speculation or turn our gaze inward, asking, "What am I clinging to? Why does this silence wound me so deeply? Is my sense of self rooted in the approval of others or in something more enduring?" His teachings echo across time, offering solace to those who feel adrift in the chaos of modern relationships. In a world where digital communication has made emotional distance both effortless and agonizing, where connections can be severed with the mere act of blocking a number, Epictetus's wisdom reminds us that we are not victims of circumstance. We are architects of meaning, capable of choosing how we interpret the events that unfold around us. Whether we are abandoned by a lover, betrayed by a friend, or left behind by someone we trusted, the path forward is not dictated by their actions, but by our ability to rise above them. In today's world, where every heartbeat is measured by likes, messages, and notifications, the pain of being ghosted carries a unique kind of sting. It is not merely the loss of a person, but the sudden erasure of shared moments, conversations, and hopes. An abrupt severing of connection in a society that prides itself on constant communication. The paradox is striking. Never before have we had such immediate access to one another, yet never before have we felt so easily discarded. A single unanswered message, a vanishing profile picture, a fading read receipt. These small digital absences accumulate into a profound emotional wound. This phenomenon reflects a deeper struggle embedded in modern life, the tension between expectation and reality, between control and surrender. We live in an era obsessed with certainty, where we crave explanations, timelines, and resolutions. We want to know why someone stopped responding, why they disappeared, why they could not face us directly. The absence of an answer gnaws at us, feeding the mind's relentless search for meaning. But Epictetus reminds us that much of what troubles us is not the event itself, but our resistance to its occurrence. The agony of being ghosted is not in the silence, but in our refusal to accept it. Modern relationships are often built on fragile foundations, on fleeting emotions, convenience, and the illusion that love should always be effortless. Social media amplifies this illusion, presenting curated versions of intimacy where everything seems perfect until it is not. Ghosting becomes an escape from discomfort, a way to avoid confrontation, to bypass vulnerability. Yet, in doing so, it leaves both parties suspended in uncertainty. The one who disappears avoids facing their own emotions, while the one left behind is trapped in a limbo of unanswered questions. Beyond relationships, this dynamic plays out in countless aspects of contemporary existence. We expect success to follow effort, stability to follow commitment, and fulfillment to follow sacrifice. When these expectations go unmet, we react with frustration, disappointment, even despair. We cling to control, believing that if only we could manage every variable, we could prevent suffering. But Epictetus teaches that suffering arises not from the unpredictability of life, but from our insistence that life should conform to our desires. The lesson here is not resignation, but discernment. To navigate the turbulence of modern life, we must learn to differentiate between what we can influence and what we must accept. We cannot force someone to stay, to explain, to love us. But we can choose how we respond to their departure. We can either remain tethered to the past, replaying conversations that will never happen, or we can release our grip on outcomes and focus instead on cultivating inner resilience. This does not mean suppressing emotion or pretending that pain does not exist. Rather, it means acknowledging suffering without allowing it to define us. It means recognizing that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can control our interpretation of those actions. We can shift from asking, "Why did she leave?" to asking, "What does this teach me about myself?" In doing so, we reclaim agency, not over the situation, but over our own perspective. The modern world may amplify feelings of rejection, but it also offers tools for reflection, growth, and transformation. Through mindfulness, journaling, meditation, or philosophical inquiry, we can begin to untangle the web of assumptions that bind us to suffering. We can learn to sit with silence, to listen not just to the voices that have vanished, but to the quiet wisdom within ourselves. For in the end, the most profound lessons often emerge not from answers, but from the spaces between them. Once, in a city of towering glass and endless motion, there lived a man named Elias. He was not unlike many others, young, ambitious, searching for meaning in the rhythm of meetings, messages, and midnight solitude. He had met a woman, Lila, whose laughter seemed to carry the warmth of distant summers, whose presence filled the hollow spaces of his days. Their connection was swift, electric, as if they had known each other in some forgotten lifetime. Conversations flowed like rivers, late-night texts stretched into dawn, and for a time the world felt softer, gentler, as if love had finally found him. But then came the silence. First a missed call, then a delayed reply, then nothing. Her name faded from his screen, her social media profiles turned to shadows of themselves, and soon it was as if she had never existed at all. There was no fight, no warning, no explanation, only absence. Elias searched for reasons, scoured old messages for hidden meanings, replayed conversations in his mind like broken records. Had he said something wrong? Had he been too eager, too hesitant? Had she ever truly cared? Each question led only to more confusion. Each speculation deepened the wound. Days turned to weeks, and still, he waited. He imagined scenarios in which she returned, in which she explained, in which everything made sense again. But the silence remained, vast and impenetrable. And in that silence, something shifted. Not because the pain lessened, but because he began to notice the patterns of his own suffering, the way he clung to certainty, the way he believed love required permanence, the way he mistook her absence for failure. One evening, as the sun bled into the skyline, Elias sat alone on a rooftop overlooking the city. He opened a worn copy of Epictetus's Enchiridion, a book he had picked up years ago but never truly read. He had heard whispers of Stoicism before, how it spoke of detachment, of control, of inner peace. But now, in the depths of his sorrow, the words struck differently. It is not death or pain that is to be dreaded, but the fear of death or pain. He paused. How much of his suffering had come not from her absence, but from his fear of it, from the belief that love was meant to last forever, that happiness depended on another's presence, that his worth was tied to whether or not she chose to stay. That night, Elias did not suddenly heal. The ache did not vanish, nor did the memories fade. But he began to understand something vital, that his pain was not a punishment, but a teacher. He saw that he had been holding on to a version of the future that had never belonged to him. He had been chasing certainty in a world ruled by impermanence. Over time, he started to change. He no longer checked her messages obsessively, no longer tortured himself with hypotheticals. He allowed the silence to exist without trying to fill it. He wrote in a journal, meditated in the mornings, walked through the city with open eyes instead of closed wounds. And slowly, something unexpected happened. He began to feel whole again, not because she had returned, but because he had stopped waiting for her to. Years later, Elias would meet others, form new bonds, and experience love in different forms. But he never forgot the lesson that silence had taught him. He no longer feared abandonment, nor sought validation in the presence of others. He had learned that the deepest connection was not with another person, but with himself. And so, whenever someone asked him how he had moved on, he would smile gently and say, "I did not move on, I moved inward." To walk the path of inner resilience is to embrace the art of returning to oneself, not as a refuge from the world, but as a sanctuary within it. When we are confronted with the sharp edges of life, be it through loss, rejection, or the silent withdrawal of someone we loved, we are given an opportunity to cultivate a presence that is unshaken by external circumstances. This is not a passive acceptance of suffering, but an active engagement with the self, a conscious turning inward to uncover the strength that lies beneath the surface of our transient emotions. Stillness is the first step. In a world that moves at an ever-accelerating pace, where distractions abound and silence is often mistaken for emptiness, the practice of stillness becomes revolutionary. It is in stillness that we begin to hear the quiet voice beneath our thoughts, the one that does not demand answers, but simply observes. Sit in a quiet space, close your eyes, and allow yourself to be present. Let the breath steady you, let the body relax, and let the mind settle like dust after a storm. Do not rush to fill the silence with explanations or judgments. Simply be. In this space, you will find that the pain of loss does not disappear, but shifts, no longer defining you, but merely passing through you like a cloud across the sky. Reflection follows naturally from stillness. Take time each day to inquire within, what am I feeling? What story am I telling myself about this moment? Am I clinging to an outcome or resisting what has already unfolded? Journaling can be a powerful tool in this process. Write freely, without concern for structure or eloquence. Allow the pen to trace the contours of your thoughts, revealing patterns you might otherwise overlook. You may find that much of your suffering stems not from what was taken from you, but from what you expected to keep. By naming these expectations, you loosen their hold on you. Silence, too, is a teacher. It is not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of awareness. Spend time in places where noise cannot reach you, alone in nature, in the early hours before dawn, or simply in a room where no voices intrude. Let the silence speak. Often, it reveals truths that words obscure. When we stop seeking explanations from others, we begin to hear the wisdom that has always resided within us. Meditation deepens this journey. Unlike stillness, which is a state of being, meditation is a deliberate practice. It trains the mind to observe rather than react, to witness emotions without becoming entangled in them. Begin with short sessions, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and gradually extend them. Focus on the breath, the sensation of air entering and leaving the body. When thoughts arise, and they will, acknowledge them gently and return to the breath. Over time, you will notice that the mind quiets, and in that quiet, you will find a clarity that transcends the turmoil of the moment. Perhaps most importantly, cultivate compassion for yourself and for the one who left. Do not mistake detachment for coldness. True resilience is not the absence of feeling, but the ability to hold space for emotion without being overwhelmed by it. Acknowledge the grief, the longing, the unanswered questions. Allow them to exist without judgment. Likewise, extend kindness to the person who ghosted you. They too were navigating their own struggles, their own fears, their own uncertainties. Understanding this does not excuse their actions, but it frees you from the burden of resentment. As these practices take root, you will find that your relationship with loss begins to shift. You no longer see absence as a personal failing, nor silence as a condemnation. Instead, you recognize them as part of the great unfolding of life, a reminder that nothing is permanent, and that within impermanence lies the possibility of renewal. You begin to trust yourself, to trust the process, to trust that even in the wake of abandonment, you are not alone. You have yourself. And in that realization, you discover a strength that no one can take from you. In the quiet aftermath of loss, when the echoes of a vanished presence linger like the final notes of a song, we are reminded of an immutable truth. Nothing remains unchanged. The world turns, seasons shift, and hearts mend in ways we cannot predict. Just as the river flows ceaselessly, carrying away what once seemed essential, so too does life offer us moments of dissolution, not as punishment, but as preparation for something new. We have wandered through the landscape of sorrow, tracing the contours of absence, questioning the nature of connection, and learning to release the need for certainty. In doing so, we have discovered that the pain of being ghosted is not merely about the person who left, but about the illusions we carried, the belief that love requires permanence, that closure must always arrive in words, that our worth depends on another's presence. These illusions, though comforting in their familiarity, are fragile constructs that crumble under the weight of reality. Yet, from their ruins rises something stronger, the understanding that we are not defined by what we lose, but by how we respond to its absence. We are not bound by the silences of others, nor are we prisoners of our own expectations. Within each of us lies a center of stillness, a place untouched by the comings and goings of the world. It is here that we find resilience, not as a shield against suffering, but as a willingness to meet it with clarity, grace, and equanimity. The wisdom of Epictetus, like the wind that moves through ancient trees, continues to whisper its lesson. We suffer not from what happens, but from our resistance to it, and so we ask ourselves, what are we still clinging to? What expectations weigh us down? What stories do we tell ourselves that keep us trapped in the past? These questions are not meant to accuse, but to awaken. They invite us to look beyond the surface of our pain and see the deeper currents that shape our suffering. Perhaps the greatest gift of loss is the opportunity it gives us to return to ourselves, to sit in stillness, to listen to the quiet voice within, to recognize that we are whole even in the absence of another. For in the end, the most enduring love is not the one we seek in others, but the one we cultivate within. And so, as we close this chapter, we are left with a final question, one that lingers like a candle's glow in the darkness. If you could let go of everything you once believed was necessary for your happiness, who would you become?